How have you embraced or resisted the pressure that society puts on your traits or actions that are labeled as feminine?
Well, keep doing that every time. Sorry about that. So, like I said before, growing up it was tough because when I was 16, I found out like that I was gay, and so it went from being very conscious about everything that I did, like trying not to seem feminine. But eventually when I started to accept who I was, like I stopped caring and stopped being so mindful and resisting of like who I was and who I was becoming, I guess. And so, but it was pretty interesting. I grew up still as a more masculine person. And I think that gave me access to a lot of spaces, and it gave me tons of privilege to be in positions that I would never have been able to do if I was more feminine. And I have like friends that are more feminine than I am, that are way smarter than me, way more skilled, and they just don't have the same access to like positions of power or privilege. They don't have access to the same leadership. If you had a room full of 74 First Nations chiefs, and the reality is because of colonization is so embedded within First Nations communities, so is misogyny and toxic masculinity. Therefore, for someone like me, when I'm in those positions in front of different leadership, they'll listen to what I have to say because I present as masculine. And it doesn't show that I'm gay on my forehead unless I tell you. And so, so yeah, I've always seen that as like something that provides tremendous amounts of access and privilege and carried me throughout my life. And I always try to recognize that and provide access and privilege to other people that don't have what I have. And so I've always recognized that and tried to resist, but this is the society that I've been colonized into, so I'm gonna make the most of it, I guess, and try to help people that are more oppressed than I am.
Yeah, so to answer this question, I honestly don't think I've struggled with the idea of being feminine too much. It was weird, like I just thought I wasn't masculine enough. But Ryan stole what I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about labels, so I'll still say it. Society likes to slap labels on like everything and everyone, and you know, to act a certain way. And what I've learned, as cheesy as it is, throughout my life, like when you start to live for yourself and do what you want, then you'll be able to kind of resist that pressure, because either way, you're going to be labeled as either too masculine, too feminine, or not enough. And, you know, why not work to try and make those labels a true expression of yourself? And also a lot of counseling and therapy led into that.
When thinking about this question and how I was going to answer it, I stumbled across the fact that I realized that I feel like as men in society, you try to, I guess, protect yourself from being not labeled as feminine, but you protect yourself, I guess, from other people seeing you as that, or maybe like calling you out for it, kind of thing. The prime example I always think of is my wedding ring, actually. Typically when people ask me about it and go, oh, hey, like that's kind of neat. It's like a two-tone color. And I realized coming up with this answer that I always lead off and kind of, I guess, protect myself by, I usually tell people, I go, well, I know this is going to sound like really, really soft or really, you know, lovey-dovey. And then I go in and talk about my ring. And I realized that that's me just literally protecting myself, because the reasoning behind my ring is, so my wife has like a rose gold engagement ring, a rose gold band. And when we went to get our wedding rings, they're like, well, you know, you can have this dark ring, which was something I wanted, but they said, you know, you can get a second color on it. And I was like, oh, that'd be kind of neat to put some rose gold on my ring, and then I wear the rose gold side closer to my body, closer to my heart, kind of thing, to be with her. And I I say that, and that's totally fine. Like, it's okay to have those feelings and to, want that in your life and in your relationships and whatnot. But I always kind of preclude and try to protect myself by, telling people in advance that, don't judge me because of this, or don't think differently because of this. And so it's difficult when you have things like that aren't really associated with being, being the manly guy and being the macho guy, that you don't really want to, I guess, let other people see you as feminine, which really, like, it's not a bad thing. Like, that's what we're all trying to get at. But you feel the need to protect yourself in today's society, and so it just goes to show, like, we have a long way to come, and the more you do this and talk about things, the more we'll progress. But it's definitely tough to put yourself out there and act and do things in a way that society doesn't think you should.
Yeah. When I was in elementary school, every day at school was kind of like a battle of resistance against the things that I love to do. Like I kind of touched on in the last section, like I was like the only guy dancer, elementary school and my high school, I think. There's maybe one other nice guy when I think about it. But few and far between. I was constantly conflicted on that. It wasn't like until much later in my life that I'd realized that, like, if you really love something, you just do it regardless of what others think. But yeah, like, many misconceptions came out of, like, the social masculine and feminine stereotypes. A lot of people, even to this day, assume my sexual orientation just based off the fact that I danced. When I was a kid, that really used to irk me. I'm over it now. It's whatever. It was just a funny thing. I never understood that. I always had this inner battle of, like, why is this thing that I'm doing not manly enough? I never could have understood that, and that was like something that I always fought against. With dance, like, I held back somewhat on, like, my outward perception. I had, like, quite a resistance to starting ballet when I originally had to do ballet. Our studio had mandated it if you wanted to continue with, like, high-level training, and that was like, to me, that was like the most feminine dance back in the day. I was like, then I'll really get, like, then people will really bully me. I was already getting bullied, but then now I'll get, like, super bullied. Yeah, because it was the least masculine one in my brain, and, like, it's really crazy. Although today ballet isn't, like, my strong suit, it's not what I choreograph in, it's not necessarily what I teach. I loved it. I thought it was great. I really, really liked the teachings. I thought my instructor was excellent. I thought the music was great. I really, really developed a love for classical music after that. Kind of like how everyone was talking about, like, labels. I had this idea back in the day that, like, you either live up a label or you live down a label. You know what I mean? If someone's like, this person's very, like, oh, this person's very modest, very humble, very, like, I don't know, courageous, whatever. That's something that's, like, someone, like, it's like an uplifting label. It was something that if someone was to say before you, I'd be like, oh, like, cool, you know what I mean? But then you could also live something down. Someone's like, oh yeah, this person, like, they're the worst, you know what I mean? They're whatever. And that, like, idea of labels really, really screwed with my head for a bit. I really couldn't understand some things, and I didn't want people to label me anymore as, like, this, like, weird kid who, like, no one else could really understand on that sense. And yeah, like, for sure, it's so funny to me that I, like, think about it now, and I resisted so heavily, like, in school. Like, I did my best to cover up, like, any of the tracks that I did dance, but I couldn't help it. I loved it. If I could dance 24/7, I would, like, legit. Find something you love, it's great. But, like, I couldn't get it. I couldn't understand, like, why, if I liked this, people would lash out at me. Especially guys that did other sports that was like the big thing for me. I came from like that background. I just couldn't understand that side of things. That societal pressure really kind of got to me. But no, you get older, you go through some experiences, and kind of like how everyone's kind of said before, you kind of just like live for yourself. You know, it's hard to just say that. I know it sounds like a cop-out answer, but yeah. Once I really started like not caring about that, like that other perception, and kind of like really just zoned in on like what I loved, I stopped resisting, and things came much more easily in that sense.
When I take a look at this question, I look at just picking back up from my story, you know, being a counselor and things, and here I am. So being able to challenge that role that I have, but also in relationships and how they change. You know, one thing that I've been kind of asking a lot for myself personally is the role of gender in our lives, and why we sometimes gender things, you know, being mindful of our language and things, and if we do sense you know, people not encouraging, you know, true selves and doing activities and things they want because it might be out of traditional roles, to you know, be brave enough to challenge that, you know. It doesn't have to be aggressive, it doesn't have to be in a way that's not going to be responded, but just to, you know, when things come up, to ask, you know, why did you decide to make that like a male, female, another thing, you know, or why is that, you know, or if you catch yourself, why is that like a male thing that I see, you know? Take a look at mental health in my personal journey. You know, therapy was again ironic. Therapy was scary. And I also didn't feel it was like maybe appropriate or right of me to do it, that I should just be strong and save that space and save those services for other people that are having a tough time, and to be brave and challenge myself. Now like you heard in my past time, is that it's the other way, it's to advocate, you know, men's mental health matters, you know. I'm sorry I misunderstood your narrative by what I assumed, you know. Let's check in and let's take care of ourselves and each other, and make sure everybody is good and safe, and be aware of behaviors that seem irrational or unpleasant. Thanks.
Thanks. I think I'm more aware now than ever of myself and my actions and what that means. And maybe more so on a professional level, because I need to be, and I understand that, and go from there. Naturally, as growing up, and very much from my mom, was encouraged to push against stereotypes, if that makes sense, or you know, it's okay to be different, and almost encouraged to be different. Like, and again, that came from what we'd watch. We'd watch Monty Pythons growing up. We'd watch different comedies that were very much going against what the grain was, right? And I remember, you know, lots of times my mom encouraged me to do the opposite of what a teacher may have said or wanted to do, and I think, and I'm happy about that in a way. And this is all coming together because some of those traits taught to be more confident. When my oldest son was in kindergarten, I got a call from his teacher, and she said that he was being defiant. And I said, well, what happened? They said, well, in the reading circle, they have a circle, they sit and they read, teacher reads to them. They said, well, he wasn't sitting, and we'd asked him to sit. And I said, well, what did he do? She's like, well, he was laying down on his stomach with his chin like this, like looking up at her to listen intently. And she was like, kept telling him to sit, and he wouldn't. I said, okay. And I said, well, what's the issue? She goes, well, he was supposed to sit. Like, well, he can listen on his stomach. And then she started to laugh, and said, well, that's exactly what he told me. And I said, well, yeah, like, there's no issue here. I don't know what you're wasting. This is a waste of time. But that's what it comes to, is, okay, can we feel comfortable in challenging these things and being okay with some of these traits? And again, like, you know, I think about those other things, like giving hugs. You know, like my son hugged me the other day, and or said something to my wife, maybe like I love you or something, and some kid on his team laughed at him. I was like, what, you don't love your mom? Like, you know, it's just weird. Like, but to me, it's like you can see where the encouragement falls into it, and to come back and say, okay, oh, you know, this is where I want to fall into, and encourage to come back around in that sense. So to me, it's important to address those stereotypes again, but then show yourself a level of self-compassion, you know, to do what's best for yourself, but then extend that and say, okay, if I'm doing what's best for myself, then I hope in that extension I'm doing what's best for the loved ones around me. And to me, you know, that is neither feminine or masculine. That's taking care of it, and we could maybe say, you know, that was the rule. If I think about that, you know, maybe that's my job of keeping the house all together, making sure everyone's fed and taken care of. But those traits can go down further to no longer be feminine, but to be as caregiving and compassion, and kind of the shedding of labels and just being okay and secure with who you are. And that's, as I do more reflection, kind of that's where I'm at in terms of that question.
Again, thank you very much. If it were up to me, I would applause after each panelist speaks. So once again, okay, this brings us to our fourth question. How have your past experiences allowed you to be vulnerable and share your journey today?
Hello. Alrighty. So I grew up in the hood of Saskatoon, and I was kicked out of 4 different high schools: Bedford, Mount Royal, Newtana, a high school in northern Alberta, until I finally made it to Oskayak, and that's where I graduated through affirmative action, if anyone knows what that is. And so my upbringing was pretty tough in terms of poverty, abuse, being apprehended by child welfare, homelessness, all that stuff. And it was actually, I think it was my psychologist that really helped me understand or comprehend what I went through and put it into words. Because I remember I was going through an EMDR session one time, and he was like, so what do you think about everything you've been through and all that stuff? And I was like, well, it's pretty tough to comprehend. Like, I don't know why I went through that stuff. And he told me a story. He was like, he said, do you know how they make steel? I was like, no. And so he said, you take this piece and put it in the fire, you take it out, you beat the shit out of it, and you put it back in the fire, take it out, you beat the shit out of it. You keep doing that over and over and over again. And he's like, and eventually you get this piece of steel that's never gonna break, and it's gonna have an edge that's sharp enough to cut through anything. And he was like, I think your life was the way it was because you needed to be that. You needed to be cutting edge. You weren't just meant to be somebody that was going to fall at the whim of whatever. And so it really made a lot of sense to me, and I was like super happy that he shared that story with me, and it helped me comprehend my past and helped me find the words, I guess, to share without being without breaking down or anything like that. So yeah, I think.
Well, I think the first step to being vulnerable is acknowledging that, you know, you can be in pain or that you aren't feeling that great. But I have this role model and friend, Arlene. She runs Offside Hair Zone, and I started to like really talk about my mental health journey with her, like a piece of what I described to you guys today, but a lot more. And she spoke in a way that made me feel like my mental health is something to celebrate. And, you know, we started this podcast because, so that shows you the power of like one conversation. But before that, I was really terrified, and I know that that's probably a common experience of like, okay, I have feelings and I'm gonna have to like share them with people, you know. Like even now, like I'm terrified to be here on stage. Like I was on the phone last night with Roha because I was really anxious to be here. But like, you know why I'm here and why I can like kind of get over freaking out on the inside and this fear of being judged by you? It's pain. I felt a lot of it, and I feel a lot, and it was a lot worse before I started opening up. You know, I thought the most painful thing was going to be opening up. And it was at first. It's scary, it's terrifying, you know? And I'm here because I hate the idea of someone being alone with that pain. I held on to it to the point where I almost killed myself. So please don't think that you're by yourself and that you have to do it that way. And don't think that you have to stay quiet. I know it can be scary. I know it can be painful. I'm here, I'm there right now. I've been there. But if you can just start to share and express yourself, not just your issues or your problems, it's a little easier. Like we've been saying, you know, resist those labels. And I beat that fear by acknowledging, remembering my pain, and hopefully you'll never feel like that.
Thanks again for sharing everything you've done so far. For, I guess, like thinking about past experiences and I guess being able to do this and everything, I felt the same way that I'm sure everybody else here has felt when I originally got approached about doing this. It's like, I actually said yes kind of without thinking about it, and then realized I was like, okay, what am I actually kind of getting into here? And you see the questions and you start to think about, you know, how many people are going to be here? How many, what are the other people going to have to say? And it just goes to show that, I don't know, in general, you don't talk about this stuff in front of other people, and especially not the people you don't know, right? Like this is leading me into, I guess, why I feel like I'm able to do this, but my mom has been just an incredible person in my life, and my dad has been too. They've both been great, but my mom and I have always shared this relationship that I touched on earlier, that myself and my three siblings, there was never anything that was too embarrassing or too off the table. You know, my mom was still is a nurse, and so whether it was a medical thing or this or that, it was come to me. Yeah, you know, you might get in trouble later on for whatever it was, but always come to me and always chat. And now I have my wife, who I think is the exact same way. She's, you know, very open to anything, you know, we need to chat about or talk about, we do. And I think that's the biggest thing that everybody has touched on here is you need to find somebody, whether it's a friend or a family member or a professional or a friend on Xbox or a friend, like just anybody. You need to have somebody who you can chat with. It's impossible to deal with life, no matter how fortunate or privileged you might be or how underprivileged you might be. You need to have people, or at least somebody who, you know, you can get things off of your chest and who will actually listen. And it's not easy to find those people. You might have to, you know, go through multiple friends or, you know, my sisters, for instance, have gone through many counselors trying to find the right fit. And that's not to say that, you know, some are better than the others. You have to find somebody you're willing to trust, and, you know, kind of pour out those feelings. It's not easy to do that. So, you know, for me, that was my mom, and I'm very fortunate. I didn't have to look very hard, and you know, I realized that. But I guess kind of as you touched on, it's, you know, keep trying, keep pushing through and finding, you know, just find whoever that person needs to be for you.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. That's nice. Kind of touched on it in like my last few questions here, but I was bullied very heavily. I can laugh about it now, but I was tormented. I got the shit kicked out of me a lot of times. Yeah. When I did start taking ballet, my thoughts were 100% correct. Yeah. I did. I got bullied even more. I've been through a lot in regards to how society viewed me as not masculine enough to men, by men. I was born in like 99, so like I grew up around the same time, kind of as like previously mentioned, like throwing around gay as a derogatory term was like very, very common, very prevalent. It was like the easiest thing you could like snap out. So like I heard that a lot. Obviously, like it wasn't just physical, It was like there was a lot of emotional abuse, mental abuse, just people, just like, just mean stuff, you know? Like I can quite easily say like I'm a pretty vulnerable guy. Dance and music have always been like my big forms of expression for like as long as I can remember. I was lucky enough to meet like choreographers and directors and dancers who are like men who are like older than me, and like they've been through stuff as well, you know what I mean? Like they got me through a lot of stuff. There is people, kind of as I touched on before, that like have been through what you've been through, and it might not necessarily be easy to like seek them out, but they are there, and they do have relevant information that can help you in times of distress. Kind of like what I touched on my first question, like I learned that like dance is like a medium. It's a thinking, it's a feeling medium. You can't suppress that. You cannot. It's very emotive. And there's no weakness in that. I think that's something that took me a long time to realize. There's no weakness to showing emotion. Nowadays, like I look back at it and it's strange how I ever wanted to hold everything in just for the sake of like being strong and silent. Because I was bullied and I didn't reach out for the longest time. And then one time I came back to my house and I had like I had like black eyes. I had the shit kicked out of me, essentially. I apologize for the profanity. My mom is a very, very strong woman. I love my parents to death. They're great. But my mom does not take like any bullshit. It was like an almost like immediate like, who did this to you? Let's find them. So like I thank my family for being like on top of that for me in that sense, because they really did help me through a lot. But yeah, it's my past experiences, kind of as other panelists have touched on, made me numb. It made me like an unfeeling husk for a while I went through stuff, and then I just compiled everything on top of each other, and I knew. Loud voice. Let's do it again. Loud voice. I knew that if I held everything in, it would kill me. It would kill me, 100%. I was fully aware of that. And I'm glad I was aware enough to realize that. And yeah, there's, like people have said, like it's important to have like someone or like a community that like is there for you, that you can fall back on. There's a dude in the front row right here, like I'm gonna start crying if I talk about him. Great man. He got me very much into like the freestyle scene in the city, and like freestyle is like majority of what I teach and what I do now. Like, big ups to my man in the front row. Yeah. What was the question again? My past experiences, they showed me that I can be vulnerable. That was something that I needed to learn. And I think that's something that a lot of guys need to learn, kind of on their own time, in a sense, because that is like society, like as a society, kind of prohibited. And yeah, like other like great dancers, like all the dudes that I've met through like the dance scene are all like wonderful guys. Like they understand what you're going through. And I'm sure people that have like other communities, like I'm sure like the dudes who did hockey, I'm sure like their friends, like their true friends were like really good for them, good fallbacks, you know. It's good to have that. So, yeah, that's where I'll end on that one.
I like how that's how you ended it, because I did want to, actually how I was going to open up this segment is, if I think about how it changed me most, it's my relationships, all of them, you know, romantic, friendship, professional, everywhere in my life, my entire worldview, my narrative has changed, so obviously my relationships will change. I still have a lot of learning to do, but what I like is that I'm open to learning. I'm open to learning about inequalities, open to learning about how it impacts all genders and everyone of different backgrounds, and how our backgrounds and impact how we function and how we cope with uncomfortable feelings. I was just going to add from. Yeah, so in a sense, to summarize, I would say, my relationships have greatly impacted for the positive, and just like in the anecdotes and the narratives I've shared thus far, both my friendships are more open, more trusting. We're not talking about something that is really irrelevant. I used to have season tickets to the Rough Riders. I don't like the Rough Riders. Now we get to talk about things that matter, that have substance and meaning to each other, And that's not only that relationship, and that's not only the only dynamic of that relationship. We talk about other things that are also very powerful, but it's more open, it's more vulnerable, and as a result, it's more sincere.
So I like that with sincerity. One thing, so mine with vulnerability has more to do with ADHD than it does with masculinity or anything like that. I won't get too much into it, but best thing about, I often say this, the best thing about a person is often the worst until they learn how to control it or to live with it, if that makes sense, right? So for me, I could go against the grain. I was totally fine with that. Was taught to accept it and all this type of stuff. But one thing I always struggled with, and it probably comes from growing up with not having a lot of money. As I said, single mom, group in an apartment, see other people doing stuff. Always thinking, okay, I had to be this thing. I wanted to be good at stuff, and I didn't want to fail. There was a huge fear, not of failing, but almost wanting to hide it, right? So even with hockey, I started later than the other kids because of financial reasons. And I remember being made fun of my first year, but then every day for the next 2 years going to an outdoor rink and practicing, and then eventually thank you so much. And then, is this on right now? Yeah. So then eventually, in 2 years, going to be one of the, a way stronger player on a better team and that kind of stuff. And then going into, pushing myself but that wasn't because, I remember thinking, well, no, that wasn't because I loved the game of hockey. That's because I wanted to show those guys. And I did that often, It was, I have a friend, he's a farmer, and I say he has a spite farm, because he doesn't want to sell it because he hates the guy who wants to buy it, so he's just going to keep farming it right now. So, how much of this stuff am I doing out of spite? Because I needed to prove that I was this thing, right? So, fast forward years later, I have this awesome mentor. I'm now working as a therapist at a place called Family Service House too. It's an amazing place. I worked there for a number of years. And he was, this mentor of mine, he was the executive director at the time, he told me that he had to go to some conference, and he was also a session lecturer, and he was saying how he had to introduce this lecture at this conference for, I forget what university, I wasn't really paying attention because I just remember this one part of it. And he was saying how he was laughing because he failed this guy's class. And he kept going with the story, but all I heard was he failed this guy's class. Now, I said the ADHD part, so I had ADHD. I did well in high school. High school wasn't difficult. It made sense, and it wasn't my focus, but I could do it. But it was structured learning, so teachers had my back, other people had my back, it was easy. But once I came to university, and it was like, okay, here's a syllabus. You have these classes, 3 assignments, a midterm, and then a final. Good luck, you know what I mean? Oh, and you got to wake up on your own and get there your own, and no one really cares. It's like, well, okay. I didn't know how that worked. So I failed, the first semester I failed 3 classes. Got our RTD'd right away, required to discontinue. So I was about, 19 at this time. And I didn't tell anyone until this guy, so I'm 26, 27, he's telling me the story. I'm like, well, that's wild. And now, I don't have, it's funny, I don't have any of my degrees, and not because I'm pompous, it's because I just didn't think about it. And I actually gave this box to Goodwill because I was mad. My wife, we have these boxes in our basement for 3 years. Like, okay, I'm giving this stuff away, we don't need it. But it was all my degrees, certificates, family photos. I just gave it away because I was pissed off at these boxes. But the point of this, what I have on my wall actually is just those 3 classes I failed now. Because it's really important to remember, why I was doing these things and who I was trying to prove it to. Even here, being an employee, we get to take one class a term. So I should do something else. So I was working towards another graduate degree. And halfway through, I was like, this sucks. I don't enjoy it. And I'm just doing it because like this other people I work with are doing it. Like, oh, this is brutal. And so being able to quit that was huge. And then I realized that I'm really good at failing, and that's okay to be, you know, that way, and to recognize that I'm also good at persevering, and that would show, you know, through skateboarding or the other stuff I do that, you know, that becomes difficult. That this thing that was maybe the what I considered the worst thing about me that I tried to hide or overcome or lie about or whatever it was, then recognize like, oh, there's actually a life lesson here that I was too scared. So the vulnerability wasn't for others, it was for myself. Again, what we've been saying there, I think we're all saying here, is that once you're able to just accept yourself where you're at, it's going to lend out, and then it's easier then to open up and to share without kind of fear of rejection. You know, the experience of age comes with that, and those kind of things, so it becomes a bit easier. But, you know, for me, that's one of the biggest lessons, and I'm excited to look back on my journals when I'm 50, 60, 70 to realize that I don't know what the hell I'm doing right now either, right? and to feel okay with that and find the comedy that's hidden inside of it.
I think you guys know the drill.